Time now for Lions Central. Here's Brandon Alishaglu and Nick Kostora.
And welcome to another episode of Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Kostora, along with my co-host, Brandon Alishaglu. Brandon, how are we today?
I'm doing pretty well. Sun is shining down here in Scottsdale, Arizona. How's it up there in Michigan?
Well, it's pretty good up here. We got some Lions news to talk about, some updates. We have a great interview coming today with Montell Owens. It's going to be an exciting show, and I'd say we get right into it.
Sounds great.
All right. So the first thing we want to talk about is let's have a little discussion here. I've seen some stuff about this going around the internet, and that is, what second-year player on the Lions do we see showing the most improvement this season? The Lions are a notoriously young team in this league that we have a lot of second-year players, guys like Bill Bentley, Riley Reef, Jonte Green, Ryan Broyles, etc. Who do you see shaking out as the most improved second-year player this season?
Well, I just want to make sure that we're talking about the most improved, not the most impressive player, because I think you're going to find my selection is a little off-putting, I guess, in that regard. First, let's talk about Riley Reif. I mean, this is a guy that we're counting on to be a huge part of the team this year. Fans are looking to him to not just replace Jeff Backus, but to improve the position of left tackle. And the thing is, he already was a good player last year in the limited amount of time he played. He has that great athleticism, and every time we hear about him practicing this year, he's posting positive reviews. But he already earned a 6.3 Pro Football Focus grade last year. I mean, that's better than Backus had last year, and it's phenomenal when you realize that he was just a rookie.
Yeah, it's an important distinction to make. What exactly we're getting into here, most improved. We're going to see a lot of Reef, and even if he does well, we thought he was good last season. And with Broyles, he's the guy we're going to see fantasy numbers for. He's the guy we're going to see on the stat sheet. But is he really the most improved player? Because I think when we saw him on the field last year, we liked what we saw out of him as well. An interesting guy to follow will be Bill Bentley. Does he win the starting cornerback job? I'd like to see him show the most improvement. Do you see him as someone that will be in the discussion for most improved?
Well, Bill Bentley kind of worries me. Not hearing a whole lot about him from people that are at the practices. You're not hearing the coaches speak about him that much. I'm not hearing beat writers talk about how Bentley is seizing that mantle. He wants that other starting spot. But one player that has at least turned a few heads is Chris Greenwood. He didn't play at all last year, so by default, he's going to be the most improved player because, well, it's pretty easy to improve on nothing. But we know he has an incredible drive. Last year, he missed the entire season due to an abdominal injury. The key part to take out of that is was so committed to making the roster and to showing what he could do that he played through that abdominal pain for the first 2 or 3 weeks there of practice and all that good stuff. I mean, the kid had a ton of heart. Now they're talking about his speed. He had a 4.34 at his pro day. Did you know that?
Yeah, I had heard. I remember when they drafted him. It was almost an exciting pick. Locals know him. He went to Albion, a D3 school here in Michigan, and his numbers, or his physical numbers, are off the chart. He was just such a raw prospect. And he's someone was going to take a couple years, and he's still a developing player. But if he does put it all together, he's someone that it's going to be a very exciting player. He could be that surprise name that no one's talking about, especially with how Bentley and Slay are both unproven, the guys that are ahead of him on the depth chart as well.
Well, I don't expect Chris Greenwood to compete for the starting quarterback spot. I just don't. He's a very enticing player. He's big like Bentley, 6'1", 200 pounds, and like we said, he has the speed. Mm-hmm. The main thing is that we should be careful. It must be June because I'm excited about the Lions secondary. This happens to me every year. I'm probably overestimating a little bit. But also to bring back Ryan Broyles, it is the same thing as Riley Reef in the way that, well, actually, it's even more so than Riley Reef because we saw what he could do. When he was featured somewhat against the Houston Texans last year, which coincidentally was the game that Riley Reef started, he brought in 6 catches for 126 yards. It seemed like he was everywhere. Granted, we know that Houston secondary, which actually had the Lions' new safety back there in Glover Quinn, it didn't prove to be that good of a secondary, but we saw him making plays. And the only thing he can improve on this year is his health. We know what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, it was good to see that his best game last year, I mean, he was improving every week. His best game was right before he got hurt. And an interesting stat on Broyles is that 14 of his 22 catches last year were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, but he averaged 14 yards a catch. This is someone that gets upfield in a hurry, and his numbers really could impress people this season. I guess if this question were which second-year player will be the most impressive, will show the most impressive things this season, it's probably going to be Ryan Broyles, but most improved is really up for grabs. Yeah, I'm with you. That Greenwood is someone to watch. There's so many second-year players on this team, though.
Well, and talking about second-year players, there's also Travis Lewis, who I know that has been getting a little bit of excitement regarding could he battle Ashley Palmer for that linebacking spot. How do you feel about the linebackers coming into this year? Who do you like Ashley Palmer? Do you like Lewis?
Yeah, that's a great topic to get into is what's going on at that open linebacker spot. We have Ashley Palmer, who is, I suppose, the expected starter, but him, Travis Lewis, and Tahir Whitehead, another second-year player, have all beginning reps with the starting unit at that spot. And it really is a toss-up there, I'd say. I want to be excited about Ashley Palmer. He's someone that I don't think is ever going to be a quality starter in this league. I don't see him as someone that we're confident in at the position, but then we can't be comfortable turning to Travis Lewis or Tahir Whitehead at this point. They're both young guys with a potential, that scary word. Palmer, I think, has to be the guy right now, unless in preseason we just see something amazing out of Lewis or Whitehead. I'm curious to see your take on this.
At this point, Ashley Palmer is actually the least of my concerns with the linebacking core. That's
really
sad, but it's true. Yep, I am more concerned about Stephen Tulloch and DeAndre Levy. Where are these guys? Or I guess where were they?
You're more concerned about a guy in Stephen Tulloch that the players in this league just ranked in the top 100 of the NFL.
Did you see that top 100 list?
I did, and Stephen Tulloch was on it.
And I'm not sure what year they must have been watching when they were reviewing their tape to vote on this, because I'm sure there was extensive studying done by the players before they made these selections. But it wasn't last year. It just wasn't.
He may not have been, even if he wasn't worthy of that top 100 spot on the list. I feel like he has to be someone we're more confident in than Ashley Palmer this season.
Okay, and that's comparing him in a vacuum. I guess let me make my point a little bit more clear. We're not expecting Ashley Palmer or Lewis or Whitehead to be the difference maker in that linebacking unit. We just want them to be a respectable cog. They just need to be decent, essentially. But we do require, the Lions are going to need Tulloch and or Levy, preferably, and to step up and make the plays that they seem to make the years before. Tulloch missed 19 tackles last year. And while he did decently in coverage, according to Pro Football Focus, he was actually a 2.4, a positive grade, which, by the way, folks, if you're not using Pro Football Focus, I cannot stress it enough, is a great site. But his negative grade overall and those missed tackles, that's not what you want from a guy that you're paying $55 million to.
I hear you. I still disagree with you. I think Tulloch is that consistent presence on our defense. those missed tackles are a concern, but he's an all-around player. He's someone that we absolutely have to have in that defense. I'm worried about what Ashley Palmer is going to bring. I guess worried is too strong a word. He'll be fine. I just don't think he's someone that we can rely on moving forward and hope to keep in that role. So for me, we're going to need to see Lewis and Whitehead, who are the guys that we have behind him on the depth chart. We really want to see one of them develop, and if they take that role in that spot, I'm happy with that.
Well, okay, that's fine, but like I'm saying, I need Tulloch to be a playmaker. I need him. It's not that I don't want him to be out there as a fan or as an observer from the outside. What I want to see from him is him to play more consistently. It's like you said, we want him out there. He's that consistent presence. Well, if it's consistently subpar, that's not doing me any favors. As far as Whitehead and Lewis, I don't know. I'm going to have to see them in the preseason and see if they understand the reads, if they're strong enough to step into those holes that the wide nine and will open up for opposing running backs and stop somebody in their tracks. I love the thought of them playing the backup role, flying around that special teams, and maybe a spot start or two. But until I see more, I'm not going to get too excited about these guys. Yeah,
I guess I don't see us finding any common ground on Tulloch here. We are just bound to disagree. So be it. Let's go ahead and roll on into our next topic, and that's on the other side of the ball. We're going to go ahead and look at the offense, and it's a player we probably should have talked about last week, but let's give him his due now, and that is Joique Bell. Joique Bell is someone that these coaches have been very excited about so far this offseason. He's been getting showered with praise for his great work ethic. He's been supposedly the guy, first one in, last one out, along with Matthew Stafford. And some are even wondering if he is ahead of Montell LaShore on the depth chart at this point. I suppose where we need to go with this is, should he be ahead of Montell LaShore right now, and who do we want to see behind Reggie Bush on the depth chart?
At this point, I think we are starting to – I just wonder if we're dealing with a backup quarterback, backup goalie situation where we see a little bit of this guy and he plays really well in those few opportunities he's been given, but that's a small sample size. Can he do it consistently? We know he can catch the ball. I'm not even questioning that. He hauled in 52 receptions last year, and he also had a 9.3-yard average on those receptions. But his 5-yard rushing average only came on 82 attempts. All that being said, I still want to see Joique Bell be the second guy behind Bush. I like LaShore. I think there's a lot of talent there, but maybe we overrated him last year. He did have 9 touchdowns, but that 3.7-yard average, that's not going to get it done.
Yeah, and we don't want to jump to conclusions on LaShore here. We're not giving up on him, obviously, but the man's longest run last season was for 16 yards. When you get 215 attempts, we need to see more than we got out of him last season, and we need to hear the stories about him that we're currently hearing about Joique Bell, about his work ethic and his off-season dedication. The fact that we're hearing this about the guy that got fewer carries and did better when he did touch the ball, it's worth noting. Joique Bell, if he does take that second spot, I don't think anyone would question it or be too upset because we like his ability. I actually like him better as a blocker than what I saw out of LaShore last season too. So right now he's more well-rounded, but we still know what Montell LaShore is capable of. So it's almost like we're waiting for him to flip that switch, and it's just wondering when it's going to happen.
Well, and like I said before, that backup goalie, backup quarterback thing, I just want to remind everybody that remember Mike McMahon. We wanted him out there. We got him out there. It didn't go well. So
no, it didn't. We're a fickle bunch, us Lions fans. We know what we want until we have it, and then we don't want it anymore.
Yeah, true. And let's just let it play out, I suppose. But there's a lot to be excited about Bell. I wouldn't mind if he became the second guy. And one thing, actually, that just struck me, with him catching all those balls last year, what is going to be his role in the passing game? Because isn't that going to be Reggie Bush's role now?
Yeah, that is going to be Bush's role, but I guess when Bell comes in the game to spell Bush, that still adds that element of, hey, we're not taking out our receiving running back now, and now we're going to try and pound it up the middle. It's still, we could do anything with the ball, and I suppose that element of surprise is something they're looking forward to in the offense.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
All right, so let's keep the focus on Reggie Bush that we just mentioned here. There's been some talk that he could have a situational role as a punt returner, but I don't think anyone is expecting him to take that on as a full-time gig. Brandon, what do you think of this punt returner battle? There isn't anyone number one on the depth chart right now. We don't know what's going to happen with it, but what are we hoping to see? Who do we want as our number one man returning punts?
When you look at the return game, it's always an unknown. Stephen Logan was, we saw that he was signed to the Lions, and I don't think anybody gave it a second thought. So as far as who it's going to be or who I would like to see out there returning punts, I'm not entirely sure yet. I think we talked about last show, Stephen Miller's crazy vertical, if that explosiveness could translate. Well, I'd like to see him because if he hits a little hole, he's going to run through. But Theo Riddick is somebody that we know can do it. He did it at a high level, one at Notre Dame when he was given the opportunities when he was younger. But as for Bush, the only way I want to see him back there is if you remember that game where the Eagles came back, stormed back, was it against the Redskins or the Giants? I'm not entirely sure right now. But Deshaun Jackson returned that punt with no time left, and he was doing the old Madden gimmick where you run across the goal line to try to kill some time. Yeah, I do recall that. That's the only time I want to see Bush out there, when there's 5 seconds left and we have no other option.
Yeah, I hear that. I guess we also want to hope that one of these guys develops into such a good and trustworthy punt returner that we don't need to turn to a guy like Bush that we know is better because someone develops into the best. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be a wait-and-see game on the punt returner battle. I don't want to see Bush in that situational role there. He's someone we're going to be counting on so much offensively. I just don't want to wear him too thin. So I guess we have to hope someone develops into that full-time guy and go from there.
Yeah, exactly. This is a guy that's had injury issues in the past. Just the thought of him being out there more than he needs to be makes me nervous.
Yeah, and it should, especially with that injury history that you mentioned. Bush, the guy earlier in his career, that was basically all that anyone talked about, was how he was always getting hurt. And New Orleans did spread him too thin. Detroit, don't make the same mistake.
Yeah, we've already done that with our quarterback, right?
Oh, God. All right, so moving on. Let's turn to one of the signings that the Lions have recently made. I don't know how intrigued we are by this, but in this week, the Lions did bring in a tight end, Matt Veldman. They continued their run of looking at Jaguars. I don't know what Detroit's current fascination with Jacksonville Jaguars castoffs is, but Matt Veldman is the most recent one. He is a tight end. He was undrafted. He came to the Jags last season. He got hurt before he ever played a game. So now Detroit brings him in. He's a 6'7" kid. He's kind of in the mold of Foria, another guy on the depth chart. Do you think there's any chance this kid makes the depth chart?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say none.
Yeah.
As Chris McCoskey was writing about, he wrote about 10 things we learned from Lions Minicap. It came out on the 15th at Detroit News. He was writing about the tight end quandary. One intriguing note there was he thinks Brandon Pettigrew is going to have a big year. Who isn't excited about that? But I'm still not putting him on my fantasy team. Of course, I say that now. And just like every
when
year.
He's sitting there in the 8th round and you don't have a tight end, you're going to think, this could be the sleeper pick.
Exactly. So I look forward to making that mistake again. But I don't think that there's any room. Another point he made was that Michael Williams has a roster spot, that 6th-rounder from Alabama, because he's that big blocking tight end who's going to take Will Heller's role, which you have to have that guy. There's no way around not having that guy. And then we've already seen what Tony Scheffler can do. He can be exciting. He can also get the crowd a little fired up with some ridiculous sword dancing or swashbuckling or whatever you want to call that last year after he scored. But I think Joseph Faria I think he's got he has the inside track on this kid because Feldman's coming off an ACL injury and learning a new system. I mean, granted, it's not like Faria's been there that long, but he still has the inside track on him. And the other point that McCoskey makes is if Scheffler is beaten out here, or if it's kind of a coin toss situation, cutting Scheffler and taking Faria would save $2 million on the cap.
Yeah, I think that's the more interesting thing to note here. At Veldman, I think we're both just going to go ahead and say we don't see him making this roster. It's a signing, and we'll forget about it in a couple of weeks. But with Faria, we have someone in almost the same mold as Scheffler who they think can be a great pass catcher on the team, and he's cheaper. Do you put that faith in Faria already to keep him on the roster and let Scheffler go when Scheffler's a known commodity? For me, I don't want to see that happen. I think we're comfortable with what we have in Scheffler right now, and we're okay salary cap wise for this season. So let's not mess with something that isn't really broken at this point. Is where I would go with that.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I think comfort is an ally of mediocrity. This is the NFL. You've got to keep churning that roster. I've enjoyed having Tony Scheffler be a part of the team. He has brought an exciting element, but if you can get somebody to do it cheaper and possibly I was surprised when he didn't get drafted at all. I assumed he'd at least get snapped up in the 7th round. If you got somebody that can do it just as well, if not better, with, let's face it, possibly more potential since, like you said, Scheffler is he's a known commodity, but not just that, probably peaked. So and if not, maybe this would just be not to say he wasn't motivated before, that is not what I'm trying to say, but the kick in the pants to step it up even another notch.
But are we really willing to turn that pass-catching role to Faria before we've seen anything that he can do in this league? I mean, I realize in order to see what he can do, we have to give him a chance, but Scheffler, I'm not sure mediocrity is the right word because he's not our top option. That's Brandon Pettigrew. I feel like that's a good enough a good 1-2 punch that we have. I don't want to mess with the current pieces in this offense because I really like what we already have.
See, and I guess that's my point. I understand that, and I totally get your point as far as we've seen it work. But you always have to continuously change. You've got to keep churning that roster. That $2 million, framed with some more money. Hey, maybe you bring in Eric Winston now to take over that right tackle spot. Mm-hmm. There's always little things that can be done. I mean, this is classic. It's the NFL. There is loyalty only stretches as far as your last performance, and we'll get to see what Faria can do in some game situations. Obviously, we're going to need to see how he plays in practice, and that's a real battle. Scheffler needs to look over his shoulder because he's coming.
Yeah, leaps of faith have to be taken somewhere. Let's let it play out. And Scheffler, I mean, he's never been someone that we've been amazed with, but we know what we're getting. So let's see what Faria can do for now, and if he's someone that just jumps off the chart, then maybe that's one of those chances the Lions are willing to take.
Oh, God, I'm having flashbacks to old relationships thinking, oh, well, that girl might be cooler.
Yeah, it's that kind of risk, isn't it? All right, so that is the news and notes for the Detroit Lions this week. There wasn't any on-field action, so news and notes are a little slim, but we are excited to talk about that, Matt Veldman. All right, let's go ahead and move on to let's have a little fun with this. It's the off season. News is slow. The wheel isn't exactly churning a lot, but there's always fun things to talk about with the Detroit Lions. And one thing that seems to crop up every off season is the discussion of Mount Rushmore for each team. Okay, are you willing to go here with me?
Yeah, sure. Let's take the plunge.
All right, let's go for it. So Mount Rushmore for the Detroit Lions. Obviously, four people go on every team's Mount Rushmore. It's historical. There is no set rules or regulations. It's just what 4 names do you put on the Detroit Lions Mount Rushmore. So we'll go ahead and we'll say the obvious one that we absolutely have to get out of the way. This isn't Joey Harrington. This is Barry Sanders. Okay, we have NFL Hall of Famer, first-team All-Pro 6 times. He went to the Pro Bowl every season of his career. Yada, yada, yada. Barry Sanders. Argue with me if you want.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one. I know a losing hand when I see it.
All right, so we have established Barry Sanders as our first, and, well, he could be the only one on our Mount Rushmore, but we're going to go ahead and make it 4 names. Then the first interesting one that I'm going to go ahead and bring to the table is someone that I'm going to go ahead and guess most of our listeners have never even heard of, and that was a defensive player from the 50s and 60s. The guy's name was Joe Schmidt. If you try and look up his recorded tackles or sacks or his defensive stats, good luck, because they didn't keep track of those things back then. But Joe Schmidt is someone that won the MVP in 1960. This is something only 3 defensive players have ever or have been graced with since then. The guy went to 10 Pro Bowls, 8 first-team All-Pro selections. He's in the Hall of Fame. And after he left the team, he stayed on as head coach, and he had a 43, 34, and 7 record. So I feel like if there's going to be a defensive player on this list, it's someone that a lot of people haven't heard of, but Joe Schmidt's numbers definitely speak for themselves.
Well, is he still available to coach? We could still use one of those. I know you want to get rid of Schwartz anyways, but I'll be honest, I did not know this name when you were bringing him up when we were talking about him beforehand. It's hard to argue with the man's credentials. He got this 8-time All-Pros. That's huge. One thing I was just thinking about, though, Pro Bowls in the 1950s, those couldn't have been on TV, right?
I can't imagine they were.
I mean, I don't even want to watch them now when we're, at the tail end of football, and I won't get to see any for another 6 months. But, good Lord. I didn't even know that they had them back then. Yeah,
and there were a few fewer teams back then, so I'm assuming the difficulty level to get onto the Pro Bowl squad wasn't as difficult either. But still, the man made 10 of them, so there we are. Joe Schmidt, most of us have never seen him play, seen the tape, but his numbers speak for themselves. You can't argue Joe Schmidt. Let's go to our next selection, and a guy that I think is going to be universally chosen for this. It's a quarterback. There are many great Detroit Lions quarterbacks to pick from.
Mike McMahon.
Mike McMahon, Joey Harrington, Andre Ware, Scott Mitchell, Jeff Garcia. The list goes on and on, but I'm not going with any of them. Let's look at Bobby Lane. We all know the name. We have to include Bobby Lane on this list. He didn't spend his whole career here, but the best years of his career were spent in Detroit, and unlike almost anyone else in Lions history, he helped the team to 3 championships. So can you say that about anyone in recent history?
We have a hard time coming up with quarterbacks that have won 3 games.
Well, he did win 3 games. He won 3 titles, and when he retired, he was actually the NFL leader in pass attempts, completions, yards, touchdowns, you name it. And Bobby Lane had the record for it at the time. If you want to go off his Pro Bowls, he had 4 of them. He was a 2-time All-Pro. But go ahead and bring up there's a bit of controversy with Bobby Lane. I guess we also have to bring up.
Well, I'm a bit hesitant to put a traitor up there. Granted, the Lions threw the first punch by trading him away, which, well, maybe the Lions deserved what they got when Bobby Lane cursed them and said they're not going to win again for 50 years. And now that's why every fan is putting all of their hope in Stafford, because there's all those connections, same high school, same town. It is 50 years later. But when it comes down to it, there just aren't enough good Lions, and especially when you're talking about a quarterback position that's the most vital in sports. Bobby Lane gets on there. There's no question about it. Just so the listeners know at home, Pro Football Talk also had Bobby Lane and Barry on there. So, yeah, that's I think they're two consensus, or those are two picks that, yeah, we've reached a consensus on those.
Yeah, that is kind of fun, the pedigree that you brought up with Stafford going to the same high school and everything, and maybe that connection is what ends the curse. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, Bobby Lane belongs on this list, and I think it's this fourth spot where we can have a little bit of fun and a little bit of argument, because it's definitely more up for grabs. And there's a lot of names that we can go with, guys like Lem Barney and Doak Walker, and I know you'll have a few to talk about, but the one that I go with, and I hope that our listeners are willing to take to Twitter to disagree and argue vehemently against me for it, is Charlie Sanders, the tight end. We still see him on preseason coverage, and he is just awful at that. But when he did play, he was one heck of a player. He spent his entire career here in Detroit for 10 seasons. He went to 7 Pro Bowls. He's someone that was on the all-decade team in the 70s. Sanders had 4,817 receiving yards. He had 31 touchdowns. And if nothing else, he is easily the greatest tight end that the Detroit Lions have ever had.
Well, again, that's not saying a whole lot.
Yeah.
But it's hard to argue with the Hall of Famer. It is a nice thing to see him up there. I don't really have a problem with him. Another guy that was included by Pro Football Talk was Alex Karras, the recently deceased defensive end, who probably has a little bit more legitimate claim. It's a tough call right there. I'm okay with either one. But the thing I want to get to is that the last inclusion by Pro Football Talk was Calvin Johnson. Obviously, good pick. Well, kind of. I wouldn't put him on there, and here's why. There's a common denominator between all the guys on the actual Mount Rushmore. They're all dead, or they were all dead when it was constructed. So, just like everybody else on this list, I think that they should have, well, maybe not want them dead. Just let's wait till they retire before we include them in the list. So I'm going to go ahead and throw out Calvin Johnson. I'm putting Jason Hanson up there. I don't care that he's a kicker. He is possibly the second best line of all time. He's easily in the top 4. What say you?
Yeah, he's a kicker. I mean, I went back and forth on that with Charlie Sanders because I have obviously seen much more of Jason Hanson, and he's one of the most beloved players that I've ever seen with this team, and he's spent his whole career here, and he's got more points than just about anyone in NFL history. And then I keep coming back to he's a kicker. He's a kicker. He's a kicker. I don't know. I guess it depends on what your criteria for Mount Rushmore is. When you think of the Detroit Lions, I think Jason Hanson is one of the first names that you think of, and that also speaks to how bad this team has traditionally been, that one of the greatest players in our team's history was a kicker, but he was. So I can't argue with putting Jason Hanson on there. I stick to Charlie Sanders just because of what he did offensively and how he was on that all-decade team in the 70s, but I completely understand and respect the argument for Jason Hanson, even though he's a kicker.
Just to be clear, Jason Hanson was a kicker.
Yep.
But you're talking about a guy that did not miss many games. There's 2010 where he missed 8 games, but he consistently made field goals. I mean, for his entire career, he knocked in 82% of them, which the more impressive part might be that he connected on 89% of his kicks last year, which was his 3rd or 4th highest percentage of his distinguished career. The guy routinely drilled 50-yarders, ending his career with 93 of them. I'm going to keep him on the list. I understand why. That also speaks to how poorly this franchise had competed over the past 5 decades. And it just makes you cringe to think, what if we had to make a Mount Rushmore of Lions coaches? Would Wayne Fonte be on there?
Oh, wow. Maybe we should do it just for fun sometime. I don't know. But back with Hanson, maybe he should be included on the list just for the simple fact that he was willing to stick with this franchise for so long. knowing that realistically he never, I mean, other than, I suppose, in the Barry era, there was never real hope of winning a Super Bowl, and Hansen just stuck with this team through thick and thin.
No, true. That's another great reason to keep him on the list.
We have to give our love to Jason Hansen. Thank you for sticking with this team. All right, so I say now is a better time than ever to turn to the part of this show that we are most excited to get to, I'd say, and that's an interview with one of the newest Detroit Lions, Montell Owens. He's someone that we are both expecting to be a pretty important contributor on this team this season, at least special teams-wise, and we're excited to talk to him. So let's go ahead and turn to our interview with Montell Owens. All right, joining us on the program now, we have 7-year veteran and 2-time Pro Bowler, Montell Owens. Montell, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, the first thing we want to get into is a organization you're a part of called Insightful Player, and we were just hoping you can give us a little bit of information about that.
Well, I remember years ago, a lady by the name of Chrissy Carew gave me a call, and I tell you, she was a lady that had a ton of energy, a ton of passion for positive stories, things that professional athletes were doing that really painted a picture of what a pro is to be. And so her and I, we've been in touch ever since then, and she's done a phenomenal job. Just, I'm sure you all have seen. But, I mean, just a great person with a great heart and means well. So.
Now, what exactly is the Insightful Player Initiative?
The initiative of Insightful Player is to really highlight not the athlete per se, but to highlight who they are, what they stand for. Today we have so many different pictures of what success looks like, and it's funny. You've got, as you know, you've got people of influence, and a large majority of them are athletes, and so when you've got our youth looking to athletes, looking to entertainers, what have you. A lot of what success looks like is really disseminated through them. And so what she's able to do is she's able to put together just this package of pros that really are able to reach these youth, reach them and say, hey, you know what, being a professional, being a great man, being a great woman, this is what it can look like for you, and it is possible. And so I think, it's a very positive organization, stands for nothing but good, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
That sounds like a wonderful message, obviously, and very worthwhile. I see that they also are quite active they have Twitter and Facebook. Are those going to be the best ways to reach out with these stories?
Yeah. And what and a lot of people connect with a lot of the stories because success isn't you have to be a professional athlete. It has nothing to do with that. But success does have basic principles that could tie into whatever your dream is, whatever avenue you want to go down. And Chrissy's done just a wonderful job with it.
And
all right, now again, go ahead, Brandon.
Well, to be able to find these things, the organization has a website called theinsightfulplayer.com. There's also a Twitter handle that is @InsightfulPlayer, but player without the E there between the Y and the R. And like I said, you can also find them on Facebook. And Nick, do you have more to add?
Nope, but I just wanted to ease the transition a bit here, turn towards some Lions football. Montell, you come to Detroit from Jacksonville, and special teams coordinator John Bonamego comes with you. Does that help to ease the transition? Is there a sense of continuity having a coach come with you as well?
Oh, most definitely. It's hard enough trying to get 90 guys. At some point in time, we'll cut down to 53 guys. It's hard enough to get everybody on the same page in that sense. Just from, just like any organization that has, multiple members, obviously with the team, you got a lot of guys. And so just for he and I to have worked together, it really, really helps bridge the gap when a guy like myself is making a transition from one organization to the next. I agree with his philosophy, and we work well together. I mean, that's, I'm sure hence the reason why you guys, are so successful, because you work well together, and you have one goal in mind, and he and I share that, as well as the organization. So,
and to kind of follow up on that, does having that coach with you, does that help you to kind of figure out what kind of role you're going to have when you move to a new roster, like what there is going to be asked of you here in Detroit?
Yeah. With every team comes a new set of responsibilities, because no two teams are alike. Every organization does things a little bit different, but again, in regards to special teams specifically, it does help. It does help to have some familiarity.
And yeah, familiarity definitely is going to be helpful, and hopefully turning around at the Detroit Lions special teams. And
well,
one thing
and another. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to add that as coaches, I feel, and all players will tell you the same thing. Not only are coaches going to be coaches and players are going to be players, but whenever you can have a nucleus of guys that have worked together, and in this, situation, it's player to coach, coach to player. Coaches, they have a locker room voice, but the voice is stronger coming from a player. And so a lot of because if you think about it, I'm more familiar with Coach Bonamago than the Detroit Lions are. And so a lot of what the teaching that goes on outside of the meeting room, in the locker room where I spend most of my time, it really, really, I mean, you want to talk about from a continuity standpoint amongst the players, and obviously we're the ones that are on the field. Just those little side conversations of schemes and some of those things, it goes a lot further when you've got guys that are able to take some of the information coming from the head coach, special teams coach, et cetera, and able to break it down to guys in the locker room, which is big. So.
Oh, that's excellent. I mean, the experience you have that you could impart and the understanding of the terminology of these other players. One thing that's of specific interest to me is just the mindset of a special teams contributor, like how to stay focused when, a lot of these guys are usually younger guys coming into the league where they were probably playing, a lot of snaps while they were in college.
Yeah.
How do you really, get that mindset, and how would you teach that to another person? Like, what does it entail?
Well, it's funny. This is how it was taught to me, and I believe this is how it's taught to the newcomers coming in. I was a guy, and I'm sure you've read my story, but I came in. I was 8th on the depth chart as a running back with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had Fred Taylor. They had just drafted Maurice Jones-Drew that year. Brandon Tofield, arguably at the time in 2006, was one of the best backup running backs in the NFL. Greg Jones, I mean, the list goes on. And from the first day that I stepped into that locker room, into the meeting room, where there weren't even enough seats for all of us running backs, at that time, I learned what it would take I learned what it would take to have a chance at being on that team, that 2006 Jacksonville Jaguars team. And so a lot of it doesn't come from a player-to-player experience, but a lot of it just comes environmentally. You got 8 guys, and only 4 or 5 guys are staying. So when the coach tells you, hey, your way onto this team is to be a strong contributor on special teams, I mean, there isn't much more talking that needs to be done. It's either you're going to get the job done or you're not. And what that turns into is guys getting the job done, and then that turns into helping the team, which turns into winning championships, hopefully.
Well, that's always the goal. Well, you kind of touched on something there that I wanted to get into was if the people out there listening don't know, Montell Owens came in as an undrafted free agent in 2006. I was always curious about the undrafted free agent process. I mean, is it something where teams are in contact with you throughout that last day of the draft, saying, you know, if you go all the way through the draft, we would like you to come, you know, try out for our team, or is it once that final pick is in, it's just a mad dash of phones ringing?
Yeah, a lot of times it's a mad dash. You know, I'm sure there wasn't a mad dash for me at that time. You know, I was a running back coming out of the University of Maine. I believe I only had, you know, just over 750 yards rushing, maybe 1,000 total yards, something like that. But you know, I was an unheard of guy, and so after the boards are cleared, after the draft, you know, I'm up here. At the time, I was celebrating we had Kevin McMahon, who was Mr. Irrelevant that year, and went to the, I believe it was the Oakland Raiders. And, you know, I'm sitting on the couch with him, congratulating him, congratulations. And, you know, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I was going to be playing football anymore or not. You know, if I did, great. If I didn't, well, hey, just, you know, go ahead and get my degree and move on. But ended up getting a phone call, and, you know, they asked me, do you want to play some football? I said, sure.
Right.
Here we are 8 years later, so that's kind of how it works.
Seems to have worked out pretty well for you. Is it something? Yeah. And another, I guess, a follow-up to that was, so when you get that call, is it that quick? Is it something like, hey, we'd like you to come down to Jacksonville to try out, and it's like, yeah, I'm in, or is it do you hang up the phone, maybe have a talk with, you know, your agent or your advisors or whoever, and then call back?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. A lot of times they'll reach out to your advisor, to your agent in that case, and you know, they'll say, hey, you know, is Montell available? You know, what's the deal? We'd like to have him come on up for a tryout. Obviously, you know, we've got training camp, mini camp. At the time, it was mini camp in a few weeks, and you know, we'll see where it goes from there. And at the time, that was my only opportunity. And so, you know, you're not losing anything by trying. So that's how it goes. So.
Okay, Montell. So now we find you. You're in Detroit. How excited are you about the potential of this Lions offense? It's seen a bit of we've added some pieces this offseason, you included.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think with all the weapons Detroit has added? How excited are you for the potential that this offense has?
This team, I tell you, there is so much talent across the board. And when I say talent, there's a depth of talent that I wouldn't say I've seen like this. This is a great team. This is a great team that has major contributors just about on every phase. You know, this team is on the verge. It really is. I mean, we've got some playmakers. Obviously, Calvin Johnson. Some of the balls that he's caught. I mean, I'm out there the first day of practice, and you know, I'm just observing, checking everybody out. You know, just seeing kind of how things are going. And this guy is just I don't say I've ever seen a bigger, faster, stronger, more athletic, you know, up close and personal wide receiver like I've seen in Calvin Johnson. Obviously, there are others out there, but up close and personal on the same practice field, the guy is unbelievable. I mean, and the chemistry that he and Stafford have. I mean, just no-look passes. I mean, Calvin Johnson's ability to track the ball when the ball's already in the air and it's already thrown, and he's just flipping his eyes around and able to track it. And I mean, it's incredible. It really is, and that's just goodness.
And with all that talent, there is across the board at every position. There's a ton of talent, and with you coming onto the roster in that offense, what kind of role are you hoping to carve out offensively?
Well, it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been that guy that you know, I've done fullback. I've played tailback. I've kind of been that guy that's kind of been dotted all across the chessboard there. And you know, at this point, it's hard to. it's hard to materialize what that role. Because for me, honestly, every year of my career, it's been different. It's just been based off team need. Do we need more of a fullback presence? Do we need more of a tailback presence? Do we need a hybrid of both? And that's one of the elements that I bring to the table. And however they want to use it, so be it. But as you know, my primary role is to contribute on special teams. So.
Well, Montell, on that note, we would like to thank you for coming on the program. It's really been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Anytime.
Are you looking for an NFL website that doesn't throw rumors against the wall and hope they stick? Then please go to ProFootballCentral.com for up-to-date news and information. ProFootballCentral.com is back and better than ever. We're dedicated to being your #1 NFL fan site, so come check us out at ProFootballCentral.com and experience the difference.
All right, so once again, we really want to thank Montell for joining us on the program. It's exciting to get to talk to a current member of the Lions, and he had a lot of really good things to say. One of the more interesting things was about that continuity with Bonamego. He's someone that hopefully can really help to turn this special teams unit around, and it was interesting to get his take on the special teams as a whole.
Yeah, agreed. It's exciting to hear him talk about imparting that wisdom that he has. He's been in the league so long, and he worked his way there from being an undrafted free agent, that he can hopefully, inspire the rest of these guys to become the unit that they need to be if the Lions are going to compete. Another thing that I really took away from that was Montell Owens loves him some Calvin Johnson almost as much as I do.
He sure does, doesn't he? Wow, yeah, we didn't even bring up Calvin, and he was eager to talk about him.
Exactly. I loved it.
Yeah, I did too. I think that word you used about the special teams, inspired, is a good way to put it. I think a lot of last season they just didn't seem inspired, and if Montell Owens and his Pro Bowl track record can help this team with that, then so be it. It was a great signing. I'm excited to see what Montell Owens does with this team, and if he does end up finding some carries away from Bell, LaShore, and Bush that we've talked about, and more power to him. But that is our show for this week. Again, Montell Owens, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have you on. What we ask from you now is to look at our Facebook page. It's just up. Check us out on Twitter at LionsCentralPFC. You can get to the show from there. You can get to it from iTunes. You can get to it from Stitcher Radio. Please reach out to us. Send us your questions, your comments, your concerns. Tell us what you think of the show and what you want to see on it. We're eager to talk to this audience and really make this an interactive show. Brandon, I know you feel the same way.
Oh, of course. I want to hear from, hopefully a few fans. I count both of our mothers and maybe a girlfriend or two. But, yeah, we want to hear what you folks had to say. We'd love to hear any criticism, comments, or any topics you'd like to hear us discuss. Please reach out and let us know about them, and we'll get them on the air and get you a shout-out as well.
All right. So until next week, this is Nick and Brandon. Thank you for listening to Lions Central Radio, and we will see you soon.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.